This is the Soul-Filled Sisterhood podcast, and I'm your host, Nicole Burgess, licensed marriage and family therapist and an empowerment mentor for women. The information shared in this podcast is not a substitute, nor is it to convey professional, psychological, financial, or medical advice. If you could use such services, please seek them out from someone you trust. Now here is today's episode. Episode 21. Today's episode is sponsored by Nicole Burgess, empowerment mentor for introverted women. She helps women remove their good girl mask, end the people-pleasing behavior, and let their powerful awakened woman self arise. For more information on the good girl meets the spiritually awakened woman, go to NicoleBurgessCoaching.com/good girl workshop. I just want to say that my conversation with Lisa was so fun and helpful, and I wish I would have met someone like her when I was really in my 20s, because it would have helped me truly embrace more of my introversion and step into my powerful and ambitious self in the different corporate jobs that I had, between my 20s and 30s. I love the tips that she gives in our podcast today, and I appreciate her kind of staying with the flow when I was giving her kind of a tough time, when she's in Boulder, but she's been in so many incredible places as she's, transitioned in different parts of her life, and I appreciate her sticking with me on that. So I hope you enjoy today's episode. Well, welcome, sisters. I'm so excited. I have Lisa Lewis on today, and we're going to talk all about career coaching, transitioning careers, networking. Can't wait to have this conversation. Lisa is the CEO of So Much More Career Coaching, a company helping multi-passionate, and ambitious individuals create the careers they've been dreaming about. I totally fit into that group. She's experienced in managing career transitions herself. Her path evolved into coaching after working in digital marketing for nearly a decade. In her tenure in communications, she discovered her skill and passion for coaching as she ran the mid-level employee happiness and retention initiative and the Women's Empowerment Program. She has worked and interned in many different organizations, including the American Cancer Society, Teen Vogue, the Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship, and CBS. Lisa is from Boulder, Colorado, and received her bachelor's degree in economics from Barnard College in New York City. That's like two different worlds, my dear. New York City to Boulder, Colorado. I prefer Boulder, actually, but...
I hear you. It does feel a little bit like I've had a double life, and it's kind of fun and a little bit just really unique. It sometimes feels hard to tell my story because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm really excited to have this conversation with you today. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your expertise regarding about career transitions and just transitions in general when it comes to women. And as you and I both know, there's different times throughout our lives that we may run into these type of things. So I'm curious, have you ever seen like a pattern, or do you hear some of these biggest challenges from some of the clientele that you've worked with regarding career transitions?
Oh, absolutely. I think it can be really challenging to feel like you're being set up to thrive, whether it's in corporate America or in doing your own thing as an introvert, because there's such a perception around the limitations of not being as vocal and as visible and as, almost gregarious and bombastic in meetings and in business pitches and all sorts of arenas like that. So I think that there are tons of ways in which, if you identify as an introvert, which I know I do, if you are a Myers-Briggs person, I identify pretty strongly with the INTJ profile. And so for me, trying to figure out, okay, this is who I am. Now, how do I use that and accept that and not shame myself for being different from my extroverted counterparts, but still find ways to contribute in ways that feel good for me and that aren't trying to force me into pretending to be an extrovert, sort of like chameleoning myself to look like somebody and act like somebody that I'm not.
Absolutely.
That's been a core question that I think has driven a lot of my own path and my own work, as well as a big question that I see through my clients.
And that makes so much sense, right? Because if we go back to like just the developmental stages, like when you're in your 20s, I didn't even realize I was actually an introvert until then, when I started to take some college courses in psychology and all that, finally figuring out like what you were saying, the Myers-Briggs test, things like that. I'm like, oh, and it seems like our world is very geared more towards being an extrovert. And so it's trying, like, oh, I got to play this role over here so I can fit in. And you're saying, no, use the strengths that you have. So how can women who are listening and they are a little more introverted, whether they're working in corporate America, well, let's just start with that. Let's say they're working in corporate America and they need to do networking, or they're in the meetings like you're talking about, and they're needing to speak up, or they're needing to participate in it. How can they really use some of those skills that they have to stay grounded in their true selves versus pretending to somebody that they're not?
Well, it is not easy. I will start by saying that, because we receive a lot of external messages from the world that we need to change and be different. And it is really a delicate process to peel apart the distinction between which of these are helpful messages that are going to help me grow into a more expansive, more compassionate, more powerful version of who I am, versus which are the messages that are asking me to be somebody that I'm not. And I want to share a little story with you and your listeners, because I remember back when I was first getting my start in corporate communications in Washington, D.C., I was working at this consulting firm and had an amazing boss. His name was Bill. And Bill, I think, saw a lot of things in me that I wasn't seeing in myself back at that time. And so as I was working with him and for him, there was a time when he and I were in a meeting together with a bunch of other sort of important players from the office, talking about a project that we were all collaborating on. And we walked out of the meeting, and Bill came up to me afterwards and he said, "Lisa, I know you are smart, and I know you had opinions, and I know you did not say a single one of them in that meeting." And he said to me, "I want to see you lean in more." And he didn't necessarily mean it in the Sheryl Sandberg way per se, but he sort of followed up and said, "I want people to know that you were at a meeting. I don't want that meeting to have been the same whether you were there or not. I want you to make a contribution in those meetings."
Wow. What a beautiful reflection back to you.
Yeah. I mean, what a precious gift he gave me by saying, "I see you.
Yeah.
I'm noticing that nobody else is seeing you, and I want to make sure that you are seen and heard, because you're on this team for a reason. You're on our payroll for a reason. You're on this project for a reason." And I think that thinking about my role differently as not just being attend the meeting, but make a meaningful contribution in a way that's authentic to my own ideas and opinions and beliefs was a real game changer for me. Because one thing that I started doing for myself, and which I think is totally applicable to any ladies who are listening now, is I started to give myself little goals of, if I was going to be walking into a meeting, I needed to come into that meeting with the goal of, say, contributing at least 2 comments in the meeting.
Beautiful.
Even if they were comments where I was saying, "Oh, I think that's a really great idea," or "I like the approach you've taken, so-and-so," or if they were totally organic, original, new, thoughtful contributions. But I started to give myself these little games and these little objectives to make meetings feel a little bit less overwhelming and like I was getting bombarded, and to feel like I had a little bit more control and agency in those conversations.
Yeah, I love that.
That, I think, sprung forth into a list of different things that I found tend to be really helpful things to consider, as whether it is an introverted woman, or just as a woman, or just as an introvert, that can help you to feel like you have a little bit more ground underneath your feet, and you have a little bit more power and confidence behind your voice. Some of these things are applicable more in meetings, say, internally, and some of them are more applicable, say, in external meetings, whether that is developing a new business lead or going to a networking event or anything like that. So I'd love to share a couple of those thoughts if you think it would be helpful.
Absolutely. Please do share.
Well, so if we start with using your introversion as your advantage at work and working with who you are and not shaming yourself for being the quiet one or for being the one who likes to listen and likes to observe and absorb everything before you contribute. What I try to think about with social environments at work is trying to figure out what's going to set you up for success. So starting with the goals idea of, if I give myself a goal, will this make it more likely that I can make a meaningful contribution, help to advance a project, feel like I have a sense of ownership and a sense of being able to help drive the outcome? And if so, then trying to set yourself up to make that happen. So when I think about setting myself up for success, walking into internal meetings like that, the first thing that I think about doing is blocking out some time to prepare.
Yes.
So giving myself, whether it's a 15-minute or a 30-minute meeting on my calendar, that is a non-negotiable meeting with myself to prepare for a big upcoming meeting. So thinking about, what are the topics that are going to be covered? What are the pieces of information that I am going to want to have either to contribute to the conversation from the get-go or to answer questions that are going to pop up in this? And are there any other things that I have a strong opinion on that I might even want to write out some little phrases for, so that I feel like I can rattle those off right off the top of my head and the tip of my tongue when the moment comes?
Beautiful.
And I don't know if you feel this way, or if you've had clients who feel this way, or folks who are listening who feel this way, but I feel like the way my introversion manifests in social situations like that is that sometimes I feel like I have a processing lag. Like I'm listening and I'm trying to consider all the different pieces of information that are being thrown out there and all the opinions. And I feel like I can't crystallize and solidify my opinion fast enough to contribute before the conversation is moved somewhere else. So if I challenge myself to do some pre-thinking about what I might want to have on hand, what my original opinions are, the questions that I have, it allows for me to get around some of that perceived processing lag. So I feel like I can be more present in the moment and also listening, and a little bit more agile to pivot in the moment if I've already thought about things I might want to contribute.
And I think that is so spot on. And I know in some of my other conversations, we've talked also about highly sensitive persons and the traits. And one of those characteristics is that depth of processing, right? So I find it so common in a lot of my clientele, that the introversion is there. So whether they're an NT or an NF, there seems to be this deep level of processing. So I love how you're doing some of that. Let me do this before I get there, so that you're still going to get tons of information that comes in during those meetings, right? But feeling a little more prepared prior to walking into that helps you set yourself up to succeed, like you're talking about. I love that.
Absolutely. And the other thing to think about too, as you're setting yourself up for success, is who's going to be in the room. So is this a meeting of just 3 or 4 people, pretty intimate, pretty well-controlled, well-contained group of folks with whom we can get a lot accomplished? Or is this a meeting of 15 people? And if so, who are the power players in the room? Who are the decision makers? Who are the people who are going to be controlling the agenda? And what are the things that they are going to want to know, what they're going to need, what they're going to ask, so that you can make sure that you are set up with as much preparation as you can, knowing that these sorts of meetings and conversations are always inherently going to have a bit of ebb and flow to them, a bit of spontaneity. So I find that can be really helpful on the front end.
Yes. When I was going to say, even with that, so if that meeting goes, like if it's a bigger group, like you're saying, like 15 people, sometimes it's knowing that, and it's reminding yourself, if they've asked something that you do need to kind of get back to them on, it's totally okay to say that, as long as you get back to them about whatever it is they asked about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think too, to your point, that sometimes you do all the prep you can, or you miss out on your prep time accidentally. You walk into the room and you're still overloaded and overwhelmed and feel like you can't get a seat at the table metaphorically, even though you should always be taking your seat at the table literally.
Yes.
And so I feel like if that happens to you, you did everything you thought you could, you walked in there and it got hijacked, then one thing I think that introverts are so great at is being thoughtful about follow-up. So exactly to your point, if there's something that you can look up and give to somebody after the meeting, or have a one-on-one with specific key players from the meeting afterwards to say, hey, I loved your point about this thing. Have you ever thought about this? or following up with people who might have brought up a point where you wanted to add in additional information after the meeting can be a really beautiful way to just continue the conversation, continuing establishing yourself as a contributor and adding impact, and can be such a thoughtful way to sometimes help people to either save face or be able to lead with new and different information. Because one of the things that happens so often with folks who feel much, much more comfortable talking in meetings and group settings is that sometimes they can just steamroll people without even realizing what is happening. And it can give other folks in the room total egg on face moments where they feel embarrassed, ashamed, underprepared, whatever. And I think that introverts and highly sensitive people and women all sort of tend to notice and pay attention to those types of social cues and social vibes a little bit more. So being willing to follow up with somebody in private afterwards can actually be a huge gift to them, especially if they said something that might have been not completely accurate in the room, not devastating enough that somebody needed to jump in and give them an immediate course correct, but not helping their reputation or not going to help the project succeed if they don't get the information.
Right. And what comes up as you're saying that, I'm thinking, and it's really reminding yourself that when that meeting's done, if you knew in the meeting, like, I could pass along this information to them, or, nope, I need to correct this on this one specific area that they were in. It's making sure you follow through with that in the sense where if fear and doubt start to bubble up, because it's like, well, it wasn't that big of a deal, or maybe they're not going to matter, or they're not going to take my word for it or something, follow up anyways. Take that action step so that you also continue to gain your confidence level in that, right?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, and Nicole, one thing you just said too is if the talk track comes up of, that's not that big of a deal. I mean, what that is that's a secret defense you're coming up with to minimize yourself, minimize your opinions, to make yourself small. And so if you are the sort of person who thinks those sorts of thoughts, because I am all the time, it's one of these, like, it takes one to know one moments, because I didn't learn that is a way that I make myself small until somebody else pointed it out to me. But if you are the sort of person who rationalizes or justifies to yourself, well, I don't need to go talk to them because it's not a big deal. It doesn't really matter. It's not that important. Maybe stop and just take a pause to do a reality check and a gut check on that. Is it true that I'm being so nitpicky and so detail oriented that this isn't actually something that's worth bringing to their attention? Or would there be reasons to bring this to somebody's attention, even if it isn't a huge deal, because it is a deal, or because it will help for me to show how I'm adding value to this conversation, or how we can keep this project from going off the rails, or keep it within budget, or make sure that our stakeholders are going to be really happy. Because, having you as an employee or a contractor or whatever isn't something that an organization is taking lightly. They are forking out real cold hard cash to get you to be a part of this conversation. And they're paying you for your brain and for your opinions and for your contributions. So,
absolutely.
The more you deprive them of those nuggets of gold and those gems inside of you, the harder you are making it for your organization or for your employer or for your client, whoever it is, to get the full value out of you and for you to be able to bring your full self to the work.
That is, spot on. And I love that practical step you also gave within that it's really challenging sometimes when that voice of doubt, the voice of fear, the playing small, however you want to title that, when that comes up, as you said, check with your mind and your gut, which means, for what I talk about sometimes, is checking with your body. It's like, are those two things truly in sync? Or is your gut like, oh, no, you really need to go do this. This is really important. But the brain, like you're saying, the fear comes in the way. It's like, nah, it's really not that big of a deal. Oh, they only need it. It's like, then tell fear to go take a hike and go take the steps and go down to that office where you need to go talk with that person and share that nugget of information that you have, because that is how you're going to be seen and heard. And that's how you're going to really, I want to say, kind of up-level your own career, is by you taking those initiative steps, and you can still stay within your whole power of being the introverted person that you are and creating that career that you really love.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I want to expand on that part about telling fear to take a hike, because I think that there's actually some real helpful things that fear can communicate to us sometimes. And I think it can actually give us some great ideas for context to provide as we are providing a suggestion or a recommendation or a correction to somebody, because it's effectively pre-thinking about what some of the objections might be.
Yes.
So if you're having fears crop up of, oh, I don't want to tell this person because I don't want to undermine their authority or their responsibility, then utilize that fear, that exact phrasing when you go talk to that person to say, hey, I don't want this to come across in any way like I am trying to undermine your authority, because I think you're doing a great job leading on this project. But I was a little nervous or worried that you might not have this piece of information when you said that thing. Can I share this with you? Or is it okay if I share this with you?
Beautiful. I love that. And it is using that. I think sometimes, again, we get too stuck in our head, at least I do. And it's being able to say, let's share these things out loud. And that's really checking in with this other person. That you're not trying to railroad them by saying, hey, do you know this? Or do you have this information? It's really asking and being able to share that with them. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. So sometimes fear, you 100% want to tell it to take a hike because it is not serving you. It is not helpful. It is like that anxious drone in the back of your mind that's just repeating the same things that you don't need to hear because they're not helpful. Sometimes your fear is actually delivering a really useful, helpful message that can make your contributions even more valuable.
Absolutely. Well, I'm curious, Lisa, is there a big difference then? Because I know when you and I were chatting a little before we started to record, some of the people that I work with, they work in a corporation or for a company. And then other times they're actually their own business owners. So they're an entrepreneur. Do you see a big difference regarding women who are their own business owners, like you and I both are, regarding how they do networking? Where, again, I know that term we often use is whether they're overstimulated or they feel like a slime ball when they go in because they're kind of marketing themselves or they're trying to make those connections. Is there a big difference in how they can feel more, what I want to say, comfortable in networking as a business owner?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Absolutely. I feel very passionately about this because there's so many books that you read about how to be an entrepreneur and how to build your business and how to get more clients and how to find referrals that are so focused on very extrovert heavy tactics that it can almost feel like you are setting yourself up to fail just by being an introvert and being in business. But what I will say is more business owners than not that I have met are actually introverts.
Oh, interesting.
So I think it is totally possible to build your relationships and build your business quite peacefully and easily as an introvert. But I think it's really tied to not selling yourself out and not trying to act like the person that you're not.
Yes.
Because I know, so much of what people talk about with going out there and meeting 10 new people a day and never eating alone, just feel like they're so extrovert energy heavy.
As you say that, I can literally feel the energy drain out of my body like, oh, wow, that's a lot.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It sounds terrible. But introverts build businesses successfully and happily all the time. So what I would say is that to think about how to grow your relationships and network without feeling slimy and gross is to, number one, feel really good about what it is that you're selling. So one of the phrases I think you just used was you feel like you're selling yourself. And it is true at some level that you are selling yourself as the fulfillment vehicle for the services. But what you're really selling is the service and the value and the transformation for the other party, the other person, the other company, the other whatever. So if you feel really good about that work, it's going to be so much fun to talk about. And it's not going to feel like talking about yourself, which takes some of that pressure and that sort of paralyzing amount of anxiety off of it. So go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that is such a subtle shift in that thought, but it's so powerful, right? Our words really, really do matter. So instead of selling yourself, it's like, I'm selling my business. I'm selling the services or the product that I offer to help others, to serve others. And so, yeah, it has a very different feel, at least for me, as I say that, it feels very different than, I'm selling myself. Because like, no, I'm part of my business, but or and this is what I do for others. This is how I work with others.
Yes, absolutely. And two super tactical things that you can do that will make this feel even more joyful and light. Number one is turn whatever you're selling into a package. Like just give it a name, give it a title, give it a thing so that it becomes a separate entity from you.
Oh.
And then you can talk about it. So if you are, say, a coach, if you can give your coaching a name, the life transformation project, or the relationship revamp, something like that you can talk about as external to you, because coaching still feels very much like it is talking about you and yourself and can feel very intimate and very vulnerable, then that could be a quick and easy way to do it. Same with people who are creatives, like designers, and you can talk about, I'm selling this logo and rebranding package rather than I'm selling my hourly services.
Yes.
It sometimes feels so much more empowering. So that's tactic number one. And tactic number two came to me as part of reading The Referral Engine, which is a fabulous little book. And what they talk about in that book is essentially you want to build a business that is referable. So something that people get excited about talking to their network about. And the way to do that is to have something that you're excited to talk about. So the practical application of this is, how could you make the thing that you are selling more fun and more exciting to talk about?
That's cool. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is it something like surprising your client with a box of chocolates when they sign with you? Is it putting handwritten letters into the mail? Is it a little surprise gesture or gift? Is it creating voice memos for people instead of sending them emails, or sending them video messages instead of emails? Any little teeny thing that you could do to just add a little bit more sparkle to what you're doing so that it feels more exciting for you will immediately come across in the way you're talking about your work externally, and make it so much more fun for you to talk about, but then also for the people who you are engaging with to ask you questions about and share with the people that they meet throughout the course of a day or a week.
Oh, I love that idea. I got so excited as you're talking about that. Then those, examples you gave, I'm like, ooh, that would be cool to do, because there's often times that, it'll take me a while to write up an email, and I like doing voice memos because it's quick and easy. And then I get, the person gets to hear my voice and all of that. And it's different. So I love those ideas, and really making it more about, it's referable, where you're excited and other people get excited about it too. So those are really great suggestions. Thank you.
You bet. And I'll share one way that I've done this in my own business is I tend to coach women who are super analytical, super driven, super smart, and who maybe need a little bit more fun in their careers and their lives. So what I did, which is so fun for me, and I love talking about it now, is I went out and bought $70 worth of sparkly temporary tattoos.
Fun.
And I send temporary tattoos that have little mantras on them, or that say boss babe, or all sorts of things like that, to my clients, because I want them to feel that same sparkle and excitement in our work together. And I will also say I bought some Star Wars tattoos and some Harry Potter tattoos, so I can speak to their sort of like inner nerd and our inner shared love of all things fictitious and amazing. So having that as something I can talk about feels like such a fun entry point for me to talk about my business and my work. So it may not be tattoos for you or for whoever is listening, but what is that thing that brings a little extra sparkle and fun and joy into your life that then you can share through sharing your business?
Yes. And I love that. Great reminder too, is to have fun, right? It's because again, introverts, or at least a lot of them that I work with, they can be very much up in their mind, and being able to kind of drop that down a little more so that you're, again, connected to your body as well. But it's also creating fun. And I fully understand, right? As an owner of a business, it's making sure you're living in harmony with your life, where your business doesn't own everything. And so being able to create some fun in the business, and you're still doing what you need to do, but also having some of that, joy and fun in it as well. I like that.
Yes, totally. And I have a couple other thoughts on entrepreneurs and building those strategic relationships for business and other purposes. One of them is, I think that introverts make the best freaking friends. They're so thoughtful. They're such great listeners. They are so considerate of other people's needs and their feelings. And so one of the strategies that can be really effective is, instead of meeting somebody new and thinking about it through the lens of how could this potentially be a fulfilling business partnership, I think about it with this sort of, unconventional, but also much more fun approach of, could this be a new friend?
I love that.
That energy, bringing that into a conversation. And when you're listening, thinking about how to be a good friend to this person can be a total game changer. Because instead of thinking about, okay, I've heard them identify this pain point in their business, and let me think about how I could solve that. All you're doing is just being present and showing up and treating that person like they are the most interesting person you've ever met. And maybe what the outcome is from the conversation is that you follow up with a recipe or a video of corgis running around or a recommendation on a chiropractor. But it comes from such a place of love and friendship and giving that then the norm of reciprocity in a social setting will sort of start to kick in accidentally on its own, where they think about, oh, this person was so great to me. How could I be great for them?
I love that. And it's so true. I mean, I was laughing. I was going back in my own mind. I'm like, oh yeah, that's how I met so-and-so. And then they did this and then I did that. It's such the human nature where, yeah, it's like the giving and just being so excited. And well, I would say excited and that depth of, listening, that it's tuning into them, that you can also share something cool. I love it.
Well, and you do such a fabulous job in sharing that through this podcast. I mean, by virtue of starting a podcast, you are just giving like crazy to the world. All these amazing perspectives, sharing your own insight and smarts through it. So this is something that is certainly not news for you. You just might have it manifest in a new and interesting different way.
And see, to me, the bonus is I get to meet so many incredible women. So it's like, why not share it with the world? Because I just so enjoy having these conversations with different people. But I really appreciate you reflecting that back, because I actually hadn't really thought about it that way, going, oh yeah, I guess I am doing that, aren't I?
And isn't it funny how the more fun you have and the more of these great juicy conversations you have that are giving you life, the more you're able to help everybody else.
Yeah, very true. I love it. This has been some great information, Lisa. I am so appreciative of you of coming on. I'm going to ask you another question before I know we need to kind of wrap up here, but has there, over your kind of career changes, has there been anything that really stands out for you that has helped you kind of shift any mindset issues that comes up, like those mind blocks or limitations maybe, that says, oh no, you can't do this, or no, that's too scary for you to take that leap, or things that have really helped you kind of bust through or work through those mindsets that have been more limiting?
It's a great question, because it can be such a universal experience of having that little voice pop up, whether that for you is the voice of self-doubt or perfectionism or your inner critic or a saboteur or, whatever name you give to that little inner gremlin. But one thing that has been super helpful for me was when I realized that I have multiple voices happening inside of me, not in a sort of like personality disorder kind of way,
right?
But I have a lot of different wants and needs and desires and stakeholders inside of me. And I very much liken it to the movie Inside Out, where you have those sweet little different characters representing different needs and values. And it took me a long time in both working with my own therapist and also in deepening my toolbox as a coach to come across the world of internal family systems, which you could probably speak to way better than I am about to. But just noticing that perfectionistic voice or that self-doubt voice is not the only voice in the conversation has been a huge and super empowering revelation. Because if I can invite the other characters into the conversation, if I can invite compassion to the conversation, or self-love to the conversation, or confidence or trust or integrity or reality, or whoever it is who's not weighing into that current conversation when anxiety and fear and self-doubt all have a megaphone, the easier it is to see a much more balanced and clear picture of what's possible, and then to figure out an action forward that feels good, that isn't totally ignoring, those other stakeholders,
yes,
but that is still taking action even with them present.
I love that. And that is so powerful. So what, ladies, what she's talking about, the IFS or the internal family systems, another name for that is, it's called transactional analysis, which was originally developed by psychosynthesis. And it's Assagioli, if I pronounced his name correctly, many, many years ago over in Italy. And I know Richard Swartz of IFS, he talks about this, and it's all about bringing those subpersonalities together and being able to lean in, stay curious about what they're needing and wanting from one another. And it is being able to incorporate all of that together, more of an inclusion versus an exclusion of that.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful. Is that something that when you're working with clients or coaching clients that you tend to bring up often, or do you have other secret mindset tips and tricks that you love?
No, that is definitely one area I will bring in with folks almost on a daily basis when I'm doing the work, because we do have those parts of ourselves that like to come up. And the biggest piece that most women that I work with, when they are showing up, they're, very anxious or worried about things, and they're trying to move forward, or they're stuck in things. And so it's like, let's invite that part, whether again, it's that one piece that is the inner critic or the voice of doubt, or maybe something else. It's really exploring and going deeper and saying, well, let's, open up that boardroom and let's really kind of go in there and see who else is around the table. And there's a lot of other players, as you're saying, that can enter into that. And it's just being open to hearing what maybe some of their fears are, their concerns are, or whatever. And you move through that versus staying kind of stuck in it or limited in you needing to do what you need to do for your life, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a powerful and exciting shift, but it is also one that can feel really unnatural the first time you almost try to facilitate a conversation inside of yourself between parts of you.
Yeah. And I will typically recommend people to write it down. So like taking a piece of paper, folding it in half, and having a conversation between those two parts of yourself, and just start with two, and just going back and forth with that without worrying about your grammar or getting too stuck in your head, just letting that conversation flow between the two parts and then seeing where it goes. It's fun, I think.
Yeah, it can be really, I think, a little vulnerable and a little scary, though, for the first time that anybody does. So having a practitioner like Nicole in your corner to help you facilitate this sort of thing is a fabulous idea, folks.
Oh, well, Lisa, I'm curious, is there anything else you would like to share with our ladies who are listening about kind of maybe mindset shifting, or anything else to help them really keep embracing their introverted self, whether it's in corporate America or owning their own business, that we haven't covered?
I think I just want to reiterate and hit home that being introverted is not a burden. It's not a curse. It is not a defect. It's not like the extroverts were made right and you have a problem and you're broken. This is the way that you were divinely designed. And there are millions, perhaps billions of other people who have this same type of personality scattered across the globe. And there's a reason. And so leaning into that and owning that and looking at what will make you feel good and what will set you up for success isn't just a personal revolution, but it's also helping to think about how you can interact with other people in your ecosystem who might have this same way of being, this same desire for a little bit more quiet, a little more processing time, a little bit more recharge time, a little bit more one-on-one. And you can create such ripple effects within the way that you run your own business or within the organization that you're working for if you have the courage to own that this is how you were created and that it's a good thing and it's a gifting. If we look, I think about the world of nature, and if we look at, say dogs, and I will admit I am not a hugely knowledgeable canine expert, but that there are some dogs that by their breed, by their nature, are more sort of hunting type dogs. And there are dogs that by their breed and by their nature are more shepherd type dogs. And if you asked one to try to do the other, it would struggle. You might be able to potentially train it and train it and train it hard enough to get it to do a decent job at that other thing. But it's just an instinctive level way of being, a way of showing up in the world. So rather than trying to train yourself to try to show up and look like a hunting dog, embrace being a shepherding dog and embrace what gifts that gives you that the hunters don't have or would have a really hard time acquiring. And bring that to light and bring that to life in the way that you work, in the way that you are in your friendships and your relationships, because the world needs more of that. The world needs more diversity and more compassion. And you can be the person who, in your own small personal way, can take a stand for that to create a sort of world that's going to be more delightful for us all to live in.
Oh, what a beautiful message. It's so loving and self-accepting. I love that. Thank you so much for that, Lisa.
Absolutely.
I know before we sign off here, what's a good way for our listeners to connect with you? And I will have this listed in the show notes as well.
Well, thank you for asking. I would be so honored. So if anybody has been listening and gotten a little bit of value, a little bit of help out of this and wants to learn more, the best ways to get in touch with me are either through my brand spanking new website, which is lisalewiscareers.com. And I'm going to have a special link, lisalewiscareers.com/sisterhood, where any listeners can get a list of what I call my not so secret weapons, which are all the books and the classes and the resources and the coaches and the things that I have learned from and worked with in my own path towards becoming a career coach that can help people who are wrestling with wanting to make a change, but not sure about how to get the clarity or the momentum or how to build the skills and the knowledge they need to make it happen. So lisalewiscareers.com is a great place for that. Besides lisalewiscareers.com, you can connect with me on LinkedIn too. I'm very prolific there and always publishing blog posts and things to respond to. So I'd love to connect with you there.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for being on, Lisa. I really appreciate you taking the time, sharing your knowledge and your personal journey of how you have gone from, digital marketer to a career coach and helping so many women do these transitions and do it smoothly and really, really, truly stay authentic to who they are. Just so appreciate what you do.
Well, and right back at you. I mean, what a fabulous way to be a beacon of hope and love and self-acceptance and power for introverted women. So keep doing what you're doing. It's amazing.
Thank you. If you haven't already, go on out to iTunes and leave a rating and review if you're enjoying what you're hearing. These reviews, when they are seen by other women, they help kind of get that information out there in the podcast world, or feel free to share it with your friends and colleagues. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I hope you found it helpful or inspirational or even encouraging wherever you are right now in your life. If you know of another woman who may find this podcast inspirational or encouraging, please pass this along to her. I really do appreciate you taking the time to listen. Until next time, take care.